Good morning. I hope you're alive. I hope that you guys can hear. Let's just double check everything as usual. If anybody can tell that the sound and the video work, that'd be great. Okay, check. Oh, okay, actually, test. There, beautiful. Okay, everything should be going. Everything should be working. Okay, so we used to be having more listeners right away. Um, but it is what it is. We need to continue. So if you guys watch on recording, please watch on recording. All right, let me jump in. We're not going to be waiting because we're already late. So what's happening? What is happening? First of all, let me get to it. Yeah. So first of all, the chain is stalled. So we see lots of yellow dots here. Yellow dots responsible for representing nodes, while green dots represent validators. So lots of yellow nodes. While still have 63. Good morning, Mr. AK. While still have 63 instances. So the chain is stalled. You don't see on this screen. If I make it lower, I could be able to see it. Nope. Okay. Try to zoom it out. So the finalized block right now is at 1.47 million blocks, while the latest block is 1.48. So the chain is 17,000 blocks behind right now. And the average time increased significantly. You also don't see it, unfortunately. It's 14 seconds, typically supposed to be 6 to 8. So what's happening is, the chain is stalled. We screwed up. So we are as bad as Solana. Thing is this: why did it happen? How to prevent this from happening down the road? That's the most important question. And are we actually as bad as Solana? Well, we're not, because in Solana, all the validators can do the right thing and they can still run into. So all validators doing the right thing. Stakes are extremely high required for Solana. The validator nodes have pretty high requirements, and as far as technical requirements. And good morning. And despite that, the Solana would still stall always, right? For hours, because the finalization mechanism is just flawed, right? So uh, I've been doing lots of thinking, and lots of insights are appearing. Again, those insights are appearing. How you spend, certain number of hours on a single task, and then those ideas just come out of nowhere. So those are some of the ideas I would like to share with you today. Some of those ideas have been shared on Rails Wednesdays with the community. So yeah, one realization is, if you are to build an actual product, so let's forget about valuation for a second. Let's forget about prices for a second. Nothing matters. Let's just think about, what does the world need? Will the world need Bitcoin, for example? Yes, Bitcoin is working. It's slow, fine. But if I need to send transaction, I'm willing to wait for 10 minutes for the block to get processed. And then I'm also willing to wait for another hour for my transaction to be more or less finalized, probabilistically. It will never be finalized 100%. It's a probabilistic type of consensus, but probabilistically, with pretty high probability, within an hour, maybe 2 hours, the think through hard forks and stuff, right? But overall, like, if you are positioning yourself as a multi-billion, and now going back to valuation, multi-billion-dollar company essentially, right, with a centralized DAO figuring out, confirming whether a token can be launched or not, obviously controlled by the human insiders. The product needs to be good, and then your product needs to be optimized for somebody. Who is the product optimizing for? That's what we're going to be discussing today as well. So therefore, going back to the question, are we like this? Is Ghost like Solana? Ghost is stalled and Solana is stalled. No, we're not like Solana. Validator is messed up completely. We're going to be discussing this in a second. How lots of our validators, lots of us essentially messed up. Okay, so maybe let's start with that. So here I'm on Ghost DAO, and not sure if lots of you guys know, but there are lots of updates happening on many of those user interfaces, and that's why the product calls need to happen, because you guys just don't realize that there are lots of features. Like, for example, I'm going to the DEX. Like, let's start with the DEX actually. Like here, so how many of you guys knew that this gear exists? You can, kind of custom set the custom settings here for the slippage, for the transaction deadline after which the transaction fails or not, and also decimal representation for the user interface by itself, right? So you can, it's tiny things, but it's very important. Like the slippage, for example. Slippage is important. I'm not sure if you are reading news about how yet another, institutional account lost like millions of dollars on a transaction over the DEX because they set the slippage to say 100%. And then the MEV bots and everybody else took advantage of it. MEV bots are front running bots that can see the transaction, pay more in gas fees, and kind of front run you. And also sometimes there's just no liquidity period. So sometimes those traders don't understand how DEX works. They think it works like the SEX because they have no fucking clue. But sometimes the slippage is 100%. So how many of you guys know that these settings exist, for example? So that's what these product calls are needed to remind you or to tell you, to educate you that this stuff exists. Now on the BridgeIn, how many of you guys know that this table exists? And most importantly, what the hell does this table even mean for the validators? So these updates are taking place, lots of those updates not announced, and we need to create this knowledge base where, things change. And then when they change, everybody knows that they changed, or the selected group of users who are tracking the progress closely know that the change has taken place, and then they can educate the rest of the users. So in particular, this table is a great illustration why the bridge failed. So these are the validators, right? So far 56 validators sold. It's much lower right now. I think right now we have all these nodes, but not validators. And I believe this is the latest state of the Casper testnet. When finalization was still going through. So here, this is the node address, right, of validated address, and this is how many claps they've made. So let's talk about claps and applause. Once we are comfortable with the terminology, it will become a lot easier. So clap is every single validator is clapping to signify how many nodes they see. How many BridgeIn transactions they see. So let's assume that there's just one BridgeIn transaction for that specific era, right? Or for this specific epoch, which is epoch is 4 hours, era is 24 hours. So let's assume there's one clap or one BridgeIn transaction, and this guy is honest. So honest and malicious. So honest means the validator is not just have the honest intents, but actually acting honestly. Malicious validator could be either intentionally malicious or unintentionally malicious. In both cases, the validator is still malicious, right? So those are the definitions. So this guy is honest. He sees one BridgeIn transaction, and he claps for this one BridgeIn transaction. And what happens is, based on the current design, essentially 50% or more of validators must vote that there has been one BridgeIn transaction. Now, the reason why it's 50% or more is because the current BridgeIn, which is being changed right now, the current BridgeIn design architecture consensus is focused on the median. The reason why the median was selected, because not the average, is because median cannot be impacted unless the attacker controls 50% plus nodes. Okay? So that way we have a little bit of dichotomy, a little bit of dissonance between the consensus on the ghost chain itself and on the bridging. So on the ghost chain, the consensus is quite straightforward. I'm still sharing the same screen just so you guys know. Just try to listen to me now and understand the message, understand the mechanics. So the ghost specific consensus is emulating Polkadot's consensus very closely, where 2/3 of the nodes must vote. But when it comes down to 2/3, it's really kind of 2/3 of the exposure. So 2/3 of the stake must vote in order for the transaction to go through. Right? So 2/3 of validators plus one. So that is in order for us to achieve the BFT consensus. And why did we go with only 50% on the bridging side? History is history. It was just us being creative, I guess. And we were on the impression that the bridging may be different from the ghost specific consensus because bridging requires, a lot more kind of require like a lot more out of the validators, right? So the validators must be running potentially their own custom RPC endpoints, and it's just a little bit more complicated for the validators to validate on the bridging side. So that's why the rules were more lenient towards the validator for the current bridging design. So again, for the ghost specific transactions, is 2/3 and plus one validators must vote. As far as the bridging, 50% or more must vote correctly for that specific bridging transaction to go through. As we can see, even with this state, let's assume one bridging transaction was the right number of transactions. So we have one, but here we have zero. So somebody votes zero right now, right? Somebody's voting zero, somebody voting zero, somebody voting zero, right? So, and we can see somebody's voting 4, somebody's voting 10, and somebody's voting 3, so, and 5 here, and 3 here. So I mind you that nobody here, I believe, is intentionally malicious. So we don't have malicious attackers yet. So this is just our validators. How did we get to this? How did we get to the point where everybody being honest, as far as intent, is actually malicious on the bridging side? Well, because going back to telemetry, we see lots of clusters. So we see this cluster, we see this cluster, see this cluster, see this cluster, see this cluster, right? So you see this cluster potentially, maybe these clusters here. And most likely what happened is this. You can run clusters all you want. For most chains, so let's go back to this, our amazing article here that lots of you guys like, looking at requirements, right? So looking at requirements, Ghost is one of the least, if not the least, like kind of the chain with the lowest proof of stake requirements, right? So if you're running, say, Cardano or Cosmos, like it's not going to be necessarily the case for Polkadot and Ton because the requirements are just insane. And I don't think you can be running more than one node per machine. But maybe Cardano, maybe to some extent you buy this like amazing hardcore machine, maybe Cosmos, right? Like you buy these like hardcore machines and then you're able to run multi nodes on this machine. So what I was going to say is, for most blockchains, running clusters from your computer machine is a problem because you're not going to be able to do it because requirements are just too high. So you cannot necessarily, I don't think you can run 2 Ethereum nodes from one computer, especially from an old laptop. Now, if you have a server, like some hardcore server that some of you guys have, 128 gigabytes of RAM or 256 gigabytes of RAM, you may be able to run maybe, I don't know, a little bit of the Ethereum nodes, but we have 2 terabytes of storage here. So typically that's restricted, right? So typically in the space, in the Web3 space, running multi-nodes from one machine is a problem on the chain level, right? We're not talking about bridging, we're just talking about the chain level. Now with Ghost it's possible. Now with what other blockchain networks it's likely possible? Well, maybe Dogecoin, like maybe proof of work blockchains, right? Maybe Dogecoin, maybe Litecoin, maybe even Bitcoin. Now, of course, not as a validator, more like a full node. So you have that luxury with very few chains to run clusters from your machines on the chain level. With Ghost, you do have this luxury. So everything worked fine. So because some people say, well, I'm probably not a good validator. Like, like I probably should stop validating because I'm not a good validator. I don't think that's an accurate assessment, right? All these clusters are probably good validators. And they were good validators when we talked about just Ghost specific transactions. Okay. Now, what happened with BridgeIn? Well, with BridgeIn, we are relying on RPC endpoints. What does it mean? In order for us, for the node, to read, or rather to listen, right? Well, in English, listen, but it's going to be like in the development world, it's going to be read. So in order for the validator to listen to Gatekeeper smart contract on Ethereum, for example, in our case on Sepolia Ethereum testnet, we have to connect to an RPC endpoint. RPC endpoint is connecting directly to the node, and then from the node, you can hear for the events on this smart contract. Now, the most right way of such connection is to run an Ethereum node. Not like a validator node, but like a full node, archival mode, right? But kind of the industry went further, and they are offering RPC endpoints where you don't have to run a node, and you can just connect and listen to events on a given blockchain through the RPC endpoint. So RPC endpoint is a simplification of what was supposed to happen. What was supposed to happen is, if you want to listen to anything, you need every single validator must be running a full node. And in fact, that is probably going to be the right kind of idea going forward, because we are observing what's happening right now. But again, the industry went further, right? The industry said, well, let's simplify it for the users. Let's make it easier for the users, right? And let's offer RPC endpoints. Problem with RPC endpoints is apparently they are quite intensive, although they're really not, but apparently they're quite intensive. So, and in order to prevent a DDoS attack, those RPC endpoints offer certain rate limits that you cannot exceed. What is a rate limit? Rate limit is, let's assume you're requesting, extraction of events from a given blockchain, from given RPC endpoints every 5 seconds. And if you do this too actively, the endpoint will tell you, hey, pause, I'm banning you for like the next 3 hours. You cannot request anything for the next 3 hours, for example, right? Then only after 3 hours, the access opens up again. Now they're doing this in order to prevent the DDoS attack, because that's kind of what the industry thought. The industry thought, let's make it easier for the user, okay? But clearly, as happening with AI, stuff is becoming unsustainable, right? Like specific case with AI, if you guys use AI extensively, you observe that it's more and more difficult for certain AI products to have free trials, right, or free accounts, because there's no business model and they're super intensive, and the companies are just closing down access for free users, and then it will start closing down for retail paid users too, and then most likely only enterprise will have access to it. So great. Very similar thing is happening here, right? It's one of the Murphy's laws, where we tried to solve a problem. The problem was that not every single user in a decentralized world can run a validator, which is whatever. So let's solve that problem by creating RPC endpoints. And we created RPC endpoints, but then now there's another problem, that there are too many users who are hitting those RPC endpoints, we must introduce rate limits. And of course, this is kind of like a Frankenstein thing, those RPC endpoints, because you're not supposed to have it. In Web3, the idea is not to have any centralized service of those RPC endpoints. Like it's an oxymoron, right? So the fact that even us on the Ghost side, we going for those public RPC endpoints is also kind of bad, to be honest, right? Like it's kind of unreliable and also risky, because RPC endpoint is the source of truth. And if RPC, if the node offering that specific RPC is malicious, then the validator relying on those public RPC endpoints is also turning malicious. Again, we're not talking about intent, we're talking about the action. So those RPC endpoints, at this point in time, I think we're using 5 public RPC endpoints and then we're rotating. So there's an auto rotate, how every single node is using those 5 RPC endpoints publicly available, and then every single 3 seconds, the RPC the connection from the validator to the gatekeeper through the RPC happens. So every single 3 seconds, that connection is random. So what happens is, if you have a cluster, especially from the same IP address, the RPCs will just start rate limiting you, because every single node will randomly connect to one of those 5 publicly available RPC endpoints, and at some point in time, you'll have, let's assume from these 8 nodes, or from these whatever, God knows how many nodes here, God knows how many nodes here. Let's assume from this cluster here, you have like 8 nodes, right? So all 8 nodes are hitting potentially the same RPC endpoint in those 3 seconds, and of course you gotta have rate limits. And therefore, these 8 nodes, all of them will be significantly behind on the RPC side, on the BridgeIn side. So we've seen this. The reason why somebody is seeing, say, 10 collapse, 10 BridgeIn transactions, is because they're not looking at the current era. They're looking probably for like 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago. That's how much behind they are. So the fact that the BridgeIn stopped going through was not just a mistaken error happening on that specific day. I believe that was November 17. It was not just on November 17. The delay was happening over the course of the last 2 months, and nobody knew it. Nobody kind of knew what was happening. It was specifically evident once one cluster started integrating publicly available RPC endpoints, and yes, we saw on November 17th specifically, we saw somebody clap in 23 claps, which was very much out of order. We're like, oh, something is really, really cooking here. Now, the reason why somebody was clapping 23 claps, the reason why somebody saw 23 BridgeIn transactions, because they were syncing their own RPC endpoint, which was significantly behind. It was about 4 million blocks behind. You multiply 4 million blocks by 13 seconds, and you can see how many days, if not years, such RPC endpoint was behind still. So it needs to sync first. You need to sync the blocks on that kind of native, your own personal RPC endpoint. Then you'll be able to, then you'll be good to go. So what's the resolution for the BridgeIn, for the current BridgeIn? Well, the resolution for the current BridgeIn would have been to turn off all the clusters. So if you're running a cluster, just run one node on the cluster. Get up to speed with RPCs, and everything is going to be good to go. But this design was optimizing for the validators. So the BridgeIn design was optimizing for the validators. We tried to make it easier for the validators, right? Because we incentivize validators. We're like, okay, please validators, come to us. Please help us. Please run the chain. Let's become the most decentralized chain. Blah 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 blah. So let's make it easier for the validators. Let's create all the guides in the world. Let's make it super easy. Let's create some fucking commands. Let's make it whatever. Let's kind of bridge, this gap of, going from, I've never really used the black screen to like, oh, now I can run a validator node. Okay. So the user is asking, is the IP address that the RPC endpoint is seeing and then limiting based on the network address or computer IP address? Most likely, that's a great question. Most likely RPCs for limiting based on the IP address. How else can they limit? They really can't. But they do see the IP addresses. They can see the IP address if they choose to do this. So, let me put it differently. they see the IP address. The question is, do they collect the IP address? Probably they collect the IP addresses, and then based on the IP addresses, they can also introduce some type of limitations, which is a normal thing, normal behavior, right? So therefore, now if you put nodes, for example, this one gentleman in particular, I believe he had two nodes, one here, right, Norway, and then one here. Nothing happened. I believe that was the same person, right? Nothing happened for these two nodes. Why? Like it's not a cluster. It's like it's the same person but operating under two different IPs, and therefore didn't have any problems. So independent nodes like this node, maybe that node, right? This node. They were honest. They were actually honest. They were honest validators because chances are because RPCs were not an issue. But again, the key is the protocol really optimized for validators. Let's make it easier for validators because validating is so fucking difficult. You need to run a black screen. It's so insanely fucking tough, especially if I'm a new user who has no idea. I'm a new user. It's expected of me to run the validator node. Blah blah blah. So that was a very very important kind of clarification. So a person asking, I asked because I have 8 separate laptops on the same Starlink network. Yeah, so the machines could be separate, and it could be virtual machines or it could be separate physical machines. But if it's accessing through the same internet connection, then chances are it's going to be limited, right? Unless, what's the solution for the cluster in this case? The best solution for the cluster is your own RPC endpoint. If you have your own RPC endpoint, you're good to go. You can be draining it as much as you want. Now the question is, why did it happen anyways for those who tried to run their own RPC endpoint? Well, you guys just didn't run it correctly. That's it. Like, you just need to learn how to run it correctly and your problem will be solved. That's it. So like, if you want to run 100 nodes from one location, just have your own RPC. That's going to be the most prudent thing to do, and you'll be able to do it. You tried to do it, you just didn't do it right. But you will figure it out for sure. And the clusters are good. Is like there's no anti-cluster campaign that I'm trying to go after. I think clusters are okay. The clusters just need to be more prudent. That's it. And if you cannot have your own RPC endpoint, then maybe you should kind of say no to the cluster. Right? Okay. So now what? But why did the change stay? Like, anyways, like, why did it stop? Because, okay, so, bridging is not going through, but the finalization of the block tree is still going. Well, so the reason why, what happened was lots of validators just didn't know how to turn off their nodes correctly. So the bridging was not the reason. The error on the bridging side was not the reason for the blockchain to stop finalizing on the consensus level. Most users users were asked to, like, the honest validators, again, were asked to stop the nodes. And when we said honest, we meant those validators whose RPC endpoints were going through. So who were not just honest on a personal level, but who were acting honestly. And of course, malicious validators also started turning off their nodes. And they didn't turn off their nodes correctly. So how to turn your node correctly going forward. So we have the Ghost Eye guide. So here, go to chill. You see, like, chill. So boom, go to chill. It will teach you how to do it. Shift C, wait for it, and you're good to go. You're good to go. If you do that, that's it. That's all you do. Now, if you just turn off your machine, you will be slashed. Most importantly, you're not kind of helping the network, and that's why the network stalled. Like, the network paused on the finalization because the chilling was not done correctly. So BridgeIn, fine. BridgeIn is an error. It only means that BridgeIn transactions cannot go through properly. That's it. But the Ghost specific transactions were still working fine. But when everybody started turning off their nodes incorrectly, that's why we ran into an issue. That's the only reason why we went into an issue. So most likely we're going to relaunch the freaking chain anyways. We can save it, but we probably just going to relaunch it with new updates. It's just better that way. Question, Mr. IDK. Well, 1 second, let me read the question. Will this RPC endpoint still be an issue when we are on mainnet? I was talking to someone on the other day, and I was told there will be many more RPC endpoints when we are not using testnet tokens. So that's the state of the industry. That's a good question. That's the state of the industry. With all this decentralized, okay, we focus too much. Okay, let me just give you a short answer. Short answer is hopefully on the mainnet we'll have better RPC endpoints. Hopefully. Okay, that's a super short answer. Testnets are testnets for a reason, right? Nobody really cares about them. Nobody's really making money on them. Testnets is just an introduction for the mainnet. So hopefully Ethereum mainnet will be better. But will it be? That's the question. Will it be? And specifically other blockchains, like, okay, Ethereum may be an exception because the second largest one, it definitely has more RPC endpoints. Publicly available. Maybe it has 10. So instead of 5, it has 10. But if 5 were not enough, and again, 5 were not necessarily reliable, let's assume 10, which is double that, will be more reliable. How much more reliable? Let's assume the 10 validators. I'm just making an estimate. Please do not rely on that estimate. Just super, super high level thinking, which has nothing to do with reality. Let's assume we have 10 RPC endpoints on Ethereum mainnet. Each RPC endpoint is 5 times more stable. 5 times enables 5 times higher throughput, and is therefore instead of 5, it's 10, right? So therefore, the publicly available mainnet RPC endpoints will be what? 10 times more reliable. So therefore, if one node is fine for the testnet, then 10 nodes will be fine for the mainnet using publicly available RPC endpoints. Maybe. Again, that's like has nothing to do with reality. I just picked the number 5 times more, whatever, 5 times more stable out of my ass. So, but if you're running 20 nodes, that's not okay, right? Like if you're running 30 nodes, you'll not be okay, right? So you'll be limited to how many nodes you can run through publicly available RPCs. Not even to say that if you are relying on the RPC endpoint, you're relying on somebody providing the data for you, and that somebody could be extremely malicious. And we found out one RPC endpoint in particular was malicious, and we reported such maliciousness on GitHub about, I don't know, 6 months ago. But let's forget about the numbers for a second. Let's forget about the market capitalization and prices for a second. What are we trying to do with Web3? Web3 is bringing decentralization, right? And I think we all forgot about it. We just chasing the market cap, we chasing the prices, we chasing fucking placement on coin market cap, size of the community. Like we should be chasing the problem that that needs to be solved. And the problem that needs to be solved is stable, parallel economy to the current economy. And we're not achieving that. And the reason why I'm saying that we're not achieving that is if Ethereum will have 10 RPC endpoints, Pulse mainnet will have 3 RPC endpoints. And maybe more stable, who knows, but only 3. Ethereum Classic will have 2 or 3. If you go to some other blockchains like Celo will have maybe 2 RPC endpoints on the mainnet I'm talking about, not testnet, mainnet. Okay? So the only way, therefore, going forward, if you want to be extremely, extremely honest, right, as a validator, is to run your own RPC. And that's what we discussed maybe a month ago, right? Or maybe a month and a half ago, where Ghost vision shall be to bring the Web3 industry back, make Web3 great again. How? Remember, we talked about prices, price discovery, and infrastructure. So prices will grow, hopefully, because we are adding significant utility to the native coin. Secondly, we are moving hopefully will be contributing to moving a significant proportion of liquidity from CEXes towards DEXs due to the Ghost DAO action. So thus kind of capturing the decentralization back. That's the liquidity aspect. And third, our validators will have to be running their RPC endpoints, and thus significantly increasing and improving the infrastructure for each blockchain connected. And because every single chain you have to run an RPC endpoint, that is creating a pickle type of a situation. where it's like, okay, do we really need to connect 20 blockchains? Because in that case, I need to run 20 RPC endpoints for 20 blockchains. And then, of course, those blockchains, let's not forget, where is this? The requirements for those blockchains is insane, right? Like, I want to run Ethereum blockchain node. It's like, what the, like, I need to have 16 gigabytes of RAM, 4 cores. Okay, that's for the mainnet. For the full node, it's going to be lower requirements, right? But still, somewhat high. And then, well, we don't have, like, well, okay, let's assume I want to connect Hyperliquid. Okay, then I need to run a Hyperliquid RPC endpoint and node as well. So, which is like quite insane. So, kind of difficult. Like, but then the question is, do we want a Tron, for example, right? Like, in order for us to connect Tron and get access to, Tether trade, the Bitcoin Tether trade, yeah, it's again, that's a full node, that's a validated node, 64 gigs of RAM and 32 cores. The kind of the archival node will be easier to run, but still significant. So we have 20 nodes to connect from the bridge. We have to run every single validator will have to run 20 RPC endpoints. That's intensive as fuck. Doesn't sound permissionless to me, right? Because not every single node can really do that. So what we'll likely be doing down the road is figuring out exactly which blockchains to connect. And I made a post a week ago in Wales where I believe that yes, we have all these blockchains, and kind of we need to be deciding which strategy to go with. First strategy to go for smaller chains or pure Web3 but smaller chains. Again, Ethereum Classic, Pulse, Gnosis, right? Stuff like that. Get some market share there and then move into the big boys, such as, Bitcoin and Tron and Ethereum and stuff like that. That's first option. And maybe that is the option we need to be taking, right? But then we need to be really, really collaborating with those blockchains. Those blockchains need to help us with the RPCs. And that's why it's going to be a community effort. Because the community needs to start spending more RPC endpoints, publicly available RPC endpoints for the smaller chains. Because I don't think users will want to do that. Why? Because there's not enough volume there. There's therefore not enough bridging fees. However, another alternative idea is just to go for the big guys, those who are responsible for the majority of those bridging fees. And I wrote that in reality, I believe that 99% of all the bridging fees will come from Bitcoin, Ethereum, and Tron. Everything else, like all this Solana bullshit, all this Hyperliquid crap, all this Cosmos, like, that's it. Why? Because Bitcoin, everybody wants Bitcoin, right? Everybody wants to convert Bitcoin to Tether, while Tether is a centralized piece of shit, but still, that's the trade, Bitcoin to Tether. That's going to be the trade. And then Tether back to Bitcoin. That's going to be the trade. And then you want Ethereum as well as an intermediary, as the most reliable smart contract platform. So sometimes you'll be converting your Bitcoins to Tether or Tether on Tron, and sometimes you'll be converting Bitcoin to Tether / DAI / Ethereum on Ethereum. So those three chains, in which case we only need to run 3 RPCs. One for Bitcoin, which is, the easiest one, just intensive on the storage. One for Ethereum, and then one for Tron, right? That's kind of the long play, most likely. While the short-term play may be for us to get there, because if you're going to go for the big fish, and not necessarily anybody going to go through us. So in that case, we may just focus on the smaller guys first, Ethereum Classic, Pulse, Gnosis, and some other pure Web3 blockchains, some smaller ones, again, from which the community needs to prove themselves and start helping us increase publicly available RPC endpoints. Okay, so those are some of the thinking kind of that I personally went through. So that's that. So we spoke about the solution. So now let's talk about the resolution. What are we going to do with kind of going forward? I'm actually interested how many people we have right now listening. Oh, we have some people. Interesting. Mr. IDK, so if I want to build my own RPC endpoint, each chain that we interact with will require me to build RPC for that chain. Yes. And you answer the question. Yes. Perfect. Okay. Yes, we're all following. Now the question is, okay, but listen, what the hell is happening? Aren't we the most permissionless blockchain in the world? Like, what's happening? How come now it's all intense? So if you are running one node, chances are you can use a publicly available RPC endpoint. So we're still very permissionless. Now, if you want to run 2 nodes, maybe you're still fine. But if you want to run a cluster, no longer you are a retail guy, right? So if you want to run multiple nodes, Now you can still consider yourself to be a retail, absolutely, right? And you may in fact be a retail person, but in that case, maybe you entering into some type of enterprise grade type of validator for which you need additional measures. So what does it mean? Let me start sharing another screen. All right. So what does it mean? It means at the end of the day, it means the following question: whom are we optimizing for? Are we optimizing for the validators, or are we optimizing for the bridging users? We need to select one group. And I think, and the team thinks the same, and that was the realization that came to us. We've been optimizing for validators for way too fucking long. We tried to attract it as if validators was the user. And I think that is lots of disconnects, especially in Web3 happens because of that. Who are these projects optimizing for? Most of these projects and our despise for these projects is the fact that they're optimizing for VCs. That's all they're optimizing. They never optimize for the users ever, right? That's why the allocations are so fucking insane. Like a project that has 10% allocation to the user and 90% allocation to the team and insiders and VCs. Why is that bad? Well, you're not optimizing for the user, right? You're optimizing for the VC to give the money, and then of course the VC, since you're optimizing for that, VCs get what they want, and users get what's remaining, which is nothing, right? Just holding the bag of a token that is dropped 99%. Now, for us, we said, well, wait, we're not going to be optimizing for VCs. We're not going to be optimizing even for council members. We're going to be optimizing for the validators. And I think the insight I received this last week is we shall not be optimizing for the validators either. We should be optimizing for the bridging users. Why? If there are no bridging users, there are no bridging transactions. If there are no bridging transactions, there are no validators. Right? And if there are no validators, the council also makes nothing. So it's not that like council is not important and validator is not important. It's just that what comes first? How to make council the happiest? Well, to introduce as many bridging transactions as possible. How to make validators as happy as well, and we thought how to achieve the bridging transactions. Well, if you're going to bring 10,000 validators, right, it's going to be such a decentralized network. Everybody will want to bridge through that network because it's so trustless. And that's what will incentivize bridging transactions. So instead of optimizing for the council, let's optimize for the validators. Because if you're going to be optimizing for the validators, council will be the happiest. And the new realization that's coming to me finally, and lots of people thought differently. And of course, it's not that we've been thinking just about validators, but I think, maybe it's not that validator focus was 80%, bridging users were 20%. Maybe validator's focus was 51% and bridging user was 49%. But I think it has to be reversed. I think the bridging users must be 80% focus and validators should be 20%. Right? From that specific dichotomy. Because validators will not be happy. We're not going to have 10,000 validators if we don't have bridging transactions. And what we need to optimize for the users is those two bridgers. I think it was you guys, right? Like, somebody who's listening to this call right now, or some of the validators, right? Those two guys. But if we are talking about the real world, on November 17th, those two bridgers, let's assume they were real users. They never got their funds back. The fact that the chain does not work and not operating, they don't care about. They lost their money. How did they lose their money? They bridged into the gatekeeper and never got any Casper inside of the ghost chain because all the validators were fucking behind on the RPCs, on the bridging side. Now, we just lost 2 perpetual revenues in perpetuity from those two users. Those two users will never come back. Not only that, they'll scream how this ghost bridge is a total piece of shit. Okay? And in crypto, especially if you have any type of following, any type of trust, it's not a verdict, but it's extremely detrimental. And all that why? Because validators kept saying how difficult it is to become a validator. So I think that's the first insight. We must focus on bridging users. All of us must be focused on bridging users. Therefore, becoming a validator is still difficult, still challenging, but we should not be focusing on people who cannot fucking run validated nodes. If you can't, too bad, sorry. I really fucking feel sorry for you. I also feel sorry for the following reason. I think the biggest realization is like this. They're all connected together. It's not that, oh, we're evil now and stuff like that. The biggest realization is this. Bitcoin is down from 120, whatever, to 83, right? So lots of stuff on LinkedIn that I'm reading is about how Bitcoin is unsustainable for two reasons. First of all, quantum computers will kill Bitcoin. And finally, all this dirt appears. Like when Bitcoin is at 120, everybody shuts up. When now it's like selling off, everybody's like, oh, I told you so. Bitcoin is bad. Why Bitcoin is bad? Specific comments, I actually wanted to copy paste that thread with a commentary. Pretty aggressive commentary saying Bitcoin is just not fucking sustainable. The tokenomics is just not sustainable. The reason why it's not sustainable, very similar to what we said, right? Because the transaction fees are not covering the inflation. Currently, the inflation is like negative 0.8%, meaning 0.8% of inflation of new coins being minted minus the bridging fees. So, minus the transaction fees. Transaction fees do not cover the inflation. Nobody's really using Bitcoin. That's the whole point. Everybody's just fucking buying and holding. Nobody's really trading it that much compared to the inflation. Now, of course, this situation will be changing because inflation is decreasing through the halving. That's what those commentators don't understand, partially. But it's also partially true. And of course, when we have some others like Sui with massive inflation. So becoming a validator, so let's look, you're a Sui validator, right? So first of all, you have to have massive requirements, 90 million minimum stake. We covered that before. 15,000 of annual costs in server costs, right? $15,000 in annual server costs. And then you're also running inflation deficit. Like your token is also decreasing by 33% every year. As a business, if I'm a business, like if I'm an entrepreneur, I'm not going to be running Sui network node. I'm not a fucking idiot. I'm a sane individual. But simultaneously, none of these blockchains, like that's the commentaries on LinkedIn, what they got right. They said there's no good sustainable business model in Bitcoin, let alone all the other blockchains. And I kind of agree with that. As far as a business model, may not be sustainable, right? As far as a business model, again, Bitcoin serves a very different purpose. It's like a reserve. Gold does not have a business model. So it's okay for Bitcoin not to have a business model. It's not okay for Solana not to have a business model. It's not okay for Ethereum maybe not to have a business model because it's a very different kind of product. But for Bitcoin, it's fine. But when you have 200% APY, because Ghost is the only blockchain that has a business model. What's the business model? Make money from bridging fees. Where the bridging fees are coming from? From centralized exchanges. We've taken centralized exchanges already proved that cross-chain stuff is needed. So kind of the evidence is there. All we're doing is disrupting that market through decentralized design, taking those flows to ourselves. Okay, so that's an actual business model here. Other blockchains just don't have it. They literally just don't have it. They just rely on transaction fees. Transaction fees will never be enough. Not enough for Bitcoin, not enough for anything else, because people just will be buying and holding, therefore nobody will be actually using it, right? So Ghost solves that. Our transaction fees also nothing, but the bridging fees compensate for it. So what I feel sorry for is if you're a validator and you don't want to run, 200% APY, I fucking feel sorry for you. Go run Sui. I feel sorry for you, bro. Like go Dogecoin. I don't care, right? So what I'm kind of the realization was nobody is offering such insane APYs. Again, 200% is not a limit. Maybe it's going to be 30%. Maybe it's going to be 1,000%. I mean, 200% was just at that specific moment, right, on the testnet. Nobody's offering this. And this will be sustainable because people need to keep bridging. It's a sustainable source of revenue. So if you don't want to figure out how to run a node, I'm sorry. I'm fucking sorry. The thing is, if there are bridging fees, we won't have to be spending so much time attracting validators. Validators will fly to it like bees to the honey. Like, we won't have to be attracting them. They'll attract themselves in mass, okay? And I think the other realization, the reason why I think the focus has been so much on validators, like how difficult it is, because we've been focusing on. We covered this on Wales Wednesday, so let's just cover it quickly. We've been focusing on level 3 people too much, and I think that shall stop. So when I say we, I mean the team. So level 3 are very important. It's a stepping stone to become level 2. So we need to be attracting level 3s. But I think at this moment, the team will be focusing really on level 1. Okay? Because we need to turn Ghost into a profitable entity. Okay? We need to make Council happy. We need to make validators happy. How? Let's bring as many validators as possible, but let's focus on the bridging fees. Let's focus on the fucking bridging fees. Let's make bridging good. Let's make it reliable. Requires RPC endpoint, too fucking bad. Requires some additional requirements, too fucking technical requirements mostly, too fucking bad, right? Like we're not going to be increasing the stakes necessarily or increasing the minimum requirements. Like we need to make it permissionless and trustless, but we need to focus on the bridger. We need to make the bridger's life easy. Okay. Otherwise, this project will kind of collapse anyways, right? Like, so just kind of this quick allocation between levels. So level 1 is typically a dev. Now, not every single dev who describes themselves to be a dev is a dev. A dev is a dev who actually is a dev. Just because somebody says I'm a dev doesn't mean shit. In fact, people who say they're devs typically have no fucking clue. People who don't say, like, Kurt Cobain would not say that he's a musician. Right? Like, he probably would never say that he's a musician, right? Or maybe he was not the best one, right? Okay, Prince. Prince would maybe not call himself a musician or singer, right? Like, maybe they would call themselves an artist, right? So a dev would not call themselves a dev, right? So if you have some people who call themselves devs and have like all these like fucking amazing whatever resumes, like chances are not good, not good. Typically, devs are devs who have deliverables, specifically deliverables, good deliverables. So if a dev is interested in Ghost, that's the easiest person to become a validator. The goal is to contribute to the network through code-based contributions, essentially, right? And we attract them through GitHub. So if you have some developers, do not bring them through blog and Whales. Just send them GitHub link. github.ghostchain.io. That's it. That's all you need. Now, if they are inclined philosophically, they'll find all this stuff extremely interesting and they'll join the community and figure everything out. If they don't care, they don't care. So it has to be a dev who's interested. Dev who's not interested doesn't work. Dev who's also interested. The knowledge for them is 7 out of 10 if they're really devs, because it takes them no time to run stuff. It takes them no time to understand how RPC endpoints. RPC endpoints is new information to lots of level 2s and level 3s. RPC endpoint is not new information to level 1s. They know this. It just makes sense. It's natural, right? So you don't need to explain much, and they're going to be crushing it, and they will be contributing to the code base. Now, level 2, most of people on this call, level 2s are those who used to be level 3s. In fact, used to be level 4s, but then upgrade to level 3, upgrade to level 2. Level 2 will probably never upgrade to level 1, practically. If they're young, 18 years old, it will happen. 15 years old. If they are, 20, 30 and above, chances are it's not going to happen. Yeah. So level 2 just stays level 2. That's the highest, rank they can ever achieve. The description is eager. They're just eager to learn. Knowledge is 3 out of 10. They'll never be able to learn, on the dev level. Like it's never going to happen, right? Like unless again you like dive deeper and becoming a dev. So 3 out of 10. Which is still very significant because the average is 1 out of 10, if not half out, if not 0.1 out of 10. So 3 out of 10 is like you are a fucking genius. You are like dev is like level god, and level 2 is like level genius, right? The goal for level 2s is to teach level 3s and everybody else, right? So they have to enter through Whales, retain in Whales, and just teach everybody else. So level 2's goal is to teach level 3 and level 4 because when they teach, they learn themselves. Because there are 3 ways to learn. First of all, you observe. Secondly, you do it. And third, you teach somebody. And once you teach somebody, that's where you understand it. Or you understand what you don't understand, then you can go back and blah, blah, blah. Level 3s, I think that was the biggest thing. We've been focusing too much on level 3s. So level 3s, who not quite level 2s, but say they are level 2s, but they're not level 2s yet. They're still level 3. We need to make it easier for them to run a node. And the answer is no, we fucking don't. We fucking don't. In fact, if it's easy for level 3, chances are we're doing something wrong. Level 3, a very average understanding about Web3, 1 out of 10 is a huge over-exaggeration chance. It's 0.1 out of 10. The level for them is to keep upgrading and learn. And if you help them learn by running the nodes easier, we're not helping them learn. Because they're not learning anything. Because we're not making it easier for the bridger. We're making it easier for the validator. And we made it easier for the validator. And guess what happened? The bridge is fucked completely, and the chain is completely fucked as well. So everything is done. Right? So we made it easier for them, great, but the bridgers will never come back to this network because this network is not working. So level 3s, with all due respect, learn. Your goal is to learn, keep upgrading your knowledge. And of course, level 3s are typically the ones who whine how difficult it is. So we should not be reacting to it. That's it. I've been reacting to it, meaning reacting as in like trying to make it easier, and we will stop doing that. There's no now. It's not that we like angry and let's just like cut it off. We realized it's just not gonna work like this. The network will be shattered. If it's a set and forget type of machine, you buy it and any idiot can just connect it to the wall and now they're a validator. Bad idea. Bad fucking idea. Because what they're gonna do, they'll fucking connect those 10 boxes in one house. RPC endpoints will be behind, and then the bridges will not get the bridges. The bridges going through, right? So we cannot make it set and forget. So in fact, I think the evolution is running a node for Ghost while permissionless on the money level will not be set and forget type of thing. Why? Because if you want to be making 200% APY, you need to be tracing your fucking thing. It's work. It's a part-time job. And I think I'm more and more understanding that it's going to be a part-time. Now, it's not going to be a part-time job of 20 hours a week, but you need to be checking the nodes consistently. Why? Because you're making 200 fucking percent APY. Right? And if you don't want to make 200% APY, no problem. Go to Sui. That's set and forget type of thing. Go to Solana. But everybody understands. Like, it's difficult right now because there's no money. It's testnet. But in reality, it's going to be money, right? With bridging, fingers crossed and stuff like that. So in that case, it will never be even a question. Like we have a discussion right now. In reality, it will never be a question because it's such insane APY. Everybody will be earning it and they'll be shutting up and just running stuff and learning because it's money, right? Now it's difficult to imagine because we're on testnet. Now level 4 outsiders. So outsiders, we just need to, the goal is to filter themselves, like they need to filter themselves out. Are they interested? Are they not interested? They could be all ideologically aligned. I hear this ideologically aligned. Everybody's ideologically aligned, right? Like to the point where it's like, it makes, not much sense. They need to get upgraded to level 2. And they'll be able to upgrade to level 2 by level 2ers teaching level 3ers and attracting level 4ers. But I think the team will be focused on level 1s, attracting level 1s. Okay? Now, if you guys have level 1s, bring level 1s to the game as well, right? So some of you guys brought level 1s and that has been working quite nice. Yeah, the network is broken every single fucking week now, but that's, those are stress tests. Last thing really quickly. So the BridgeIn is in the works. We significantly enforcing it and we're making it a lot less lenient for the validators. A lot less lenient for the validators. If we have, example, and then we'll pass on that. If we have 5 BridgeIn transactions, and I vote for 5 BridgeIn transactions for 5 specific BridgeIn transactions, good. Mr. IDK, I'm sorry for picking you. If your nodes vote only for 3 out of 5 transactions, you will be slashed. Before we were a lot lenient. Before we said, well, the median has to agree. And if you're not part of the median, you're okay. Now we're saying, if you do not match the exact number of bridging transactions, you will be slashed for each one. So for example, Mr. IDK just got 3 out of 5, I got 5 out of 5, and let's assume Scorpion got 1 out of 5. Scorpion will be slashed more than Mr. IDK. But both of you guys will be slashed. Now, it's very not lenient for the validators. Like, meaning RPC endpoints must be so fucking stellar. The bridging consensus will be so much more stringent compared to the Ghost specific consensus. On the Ghost specific consensus, Up to 10% of validators cannot be, can be completely unavailable, and those 10% will never, not, they'll be disabled, but they will not be slashed. On the BridgeIn though, the current design that is in the works, if you do not match 1-for-1, you are fucking slashed. So watch your RPCs. So we'll not get to the point where we got today, because by the time, like today, the reason why we got today is because the majority is behind with the current design. With the upcoming design, we'll never be able to get to that situation, because if you are somewhat deviating from the consensus, you are slashed immediately and disabled. Okay? So we'll just not get there. So we are essentially realizing that, yes, we shall not be making it easier for the validators. We shall make it easier for the user. On this positive note, let's pause. Let's resume next week. Thank you so much. Have a good one. Bye-bye.